Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Hey everybody, Coach Mark here. So in today's video, this is going to be an extemporaneous live, and I'm talking in pretty broad terms on one of my athletes' upcoming training. We're about 30 weeks out from a strongman show. Think of this again as the title slide implies, so a 10,000 feet in the air perspective. We're talking very broad. So Nico is who I'm going to be talking about today. He's one of the newest members of the Conjugate Cartel, and he wants to do a show in October. The show is going to consist of 3 events in the following order. It'll be a truck pull, so that's just where it's a harness-style pull where he's going to have the rope, right, pulling himself in the truck downfield, so it's not a seated hand-over-hand pull. Then it's going to be a Viking press for reps, and then a mammoth bar wagon wheel deadlift for a 1-rep max. So again, as of today, we've got 30 weeks from this competition. Now, with 30 weeks until the show, we do have a lot of time to train for it. However, I think one of the easiest mistakes to make, and one of the most common mistakes a lot of people make when it comes to strongman, is getting way too specific way too soon. I'm a big believer in being less specific in terms of the further out you are from a show, because you want to maximize your development, right? Something you've probably heard me say many a time is in the off season, we're building the best possible you. And then when it comes time for prep time, right, when we're peaking you for a strongman competition, it's very much jamming a square peg into a round hole. So when we aren't prepping for a show, we want to build the strongest, most resilient version of yourself to handle the rigors of peaking for a competition. And then immediately post-competition, we move into more of a restorative phase to help undo some of the damage that inevitably comes with peaking for a competition, whether it be physical, mental, or a bit of both. Now, Nico himself is newer to the sport of strongman, so we can also get away with a shorter prep cycle, right? If you're newer to something, it's one of those things where it's been my experience and observation, and I'm sure a lot of people will corroborate this as well. You know, novice lifters don't need complicated peaking cycles in powerlifting, for example. And it's kind of the same thing with strongman. We don't need to spend a lot of time extracting his maximal strength versus someone who's competed for several years, because he can get to his peak faster. As such, normally I run peaking cycles for 12 to 16 weeks. In his case, I'm going to run it for closer to 8 weeks, which means we've got 22 weeks of prep time, if you will. Again, these are all rough numbers, right? This is our 10,000 feet in the air perspective. But that said, let's go ahead and break it down. Oh, look at him break it down. I want to play some music, but I don't want to get hit with a copyright, so just bear with me, all right? I'm a silly little goose. Okay. So let's first take a look at where we have been in terms of training with Nico to get a good idea of what comes next. I have him on a full body conjugate split, so lower max effort, full body accessories, upper max effort, full body accessories, then a full body developmental / dynamic day and full body accessories. This 3-day full body conjugate split is getting really popular. I think I'm going to have to do more stuff on it. And I am kind of calling it Tacitus conjugate. I think that's a cool name for it. But that's a whole different video series probably, and a whole different ebook coming up down the road for you lovely folks. Now, in his last training wave, which was his first training wave with me, here were our big 4. Lower max effort was a paused high bar squat. Upper max effort was a semi-pause, kind of slow pause, not like powerlifting pause, but not bounced, close grip bench. And then for his developmental / dynamic effort day, we had a landmine, clean and jerk, and deadlifts. So Nico himself actually does compete in landmine games as well, and I think the landmine, clean and jerk slotted in really nicely here. Plus, it keeps him very explosive, which is one of the key components of dynamic effort, especially in a strongman context. We want to think about that explosive athleticism moving in 3 dimensions. Now that we know kind of where we've been, let's talk about where we're going and get a little closer to ground floor. So, observationally, Nico has a lot of places we can squeeze out some easy progress just via technique and smarter programming. And if we look at the show's events, we can paint a picture of our key development areas. We need pressing strength. We need all kinds of back strength. We need leg strength endurance because of the truck pull, and then general conditioning. So, based off of these needs, we've got a few conclusions we can work with. Squatting is going to continue to be a primary max effort variation, especially done for reps. We'll probably do some pause work as well, and then we're going to do it to a box in later cycles just to reduce back, hip, and knee fatigue, as well as preferentially target the posterior chain in a squat pattern, which is going to have better transference to the truck pull and the deadlift. Max effort pressing is going to be extremely tricep dominant variations such as floor press, close grip, maybe even boards are definitely something we're going to experiment with. Again, 10,000 feet in the air. Based off of his feedback and what I'm observing, this is all subject to change. We're going to do sled work for accessories, sled pushes, sled pulls, sled face pulls, sled tricep extensions, lateral walks with the sleds for adductor strength to help keep his hips nice and stable. These are all highly viable variations. And then the push press, and eventually he is getting a Viking handle, but even just a standard barbell push press slots in really nicely here, or a landmine clean and press. We can play with it, right? And deads, we're just going to use those in standard developmental cycles until it comes time for peaking. Now, as far as the split goes, we are going to keep Nico on his 3 times a week full body conjugate until it's peaking time for the show, and then I'm going to switch him over to something like a lower, upper, and full body day. Reason why I'm going to do it that way is that's going to help me better consolidate fatigue. He has expressed preference for full body training, which I totally, of course I'm going to work with that. But again, when it comes peaking time, square peg, round hole. So that's why we're going to change the split out a little bit. At least that's the plan. Who knows? We might change it and we might stay full body. Now, as far as these 22 weeks go, what I'm probably going to do is have a 4-week wave again, and then we'll move down into 3-week waves. This allows us a total of 7 waves leading into his show prep. As it goes from wave to wave, though, I'm going to change it out. Obviously, waves run 3 to 5 weeks at a time in my world. That's just been my experience. I've expanded waves for up to 8 weeks as well. It all just depends on how things are turning over. That's where we get closer to, 5,000 feet in the air, right? Now, here's an example of what the waves might look like. Wave 1, and these are just our max effort variations. Again, our developmental waves are kind of a separate thing. But wave 1, we might do front squat and floor press. Wave 2 could be high bar box squats and incline on a 30 degree. Wave 3 might be the SSB squat and 60 degree incline. Wave 4 could be the SSB box squat and a Smith 60 degree incline. And then wave 5 could be a high bar pause squat and a Smith seated overhead press. Now the Smith machine is one of those things, people love to hate it, but if we look at the Viking press, it's actually mechanically very similar to a Smith machine. I think a Smith machine push press would be an awesome variation to use in this context for Nico in later waves. All depends on whether his Smith lets him actually do a full push press. I know for myself, just based off my height and my comical wingspan, I actually cannot do a Smith machine push press in the gym that I operate out of because I'll be slamming into the top catches every single time. But that's something to keep in mind. There's some free advice for your coach who follows me, if they have access to it, is a Smith machine push press, especially if they have one that's on the diagonal, right, a slightly angled Smith machine, because then you can kind of get that lean forward and push into it to emulate the arcing path that a Viking press operates on. Now, again, you'll notice how the movements do slowly get more specific to the competition as we get through subsequent waves. And remember that the deadlift and push press, we're just hitting those on developmental days. Now, on the peak side of things, what we're going to do is the deadlift and Viking press are going to move to more of a block approach, something I've talked about before. I don't use really kind of boilerplate conjugate when prepping for a strongman competition, as I do think block approaches make a bit more sense here, but conjugate elements still will show up in how I go about it. Now, one of the things too is doing it this way is we're going to build up a lot of reserve strength and strength endurance in these previous waves leading into prep. So now in peaking, our main focus is just the skill extraction and really kind of bringing all that strength that we've built to the surface. That's the whole point of a peak. You don't really get stronger in a peak. You merely reveal what you've had the whole time, and you get that skill with the heavier loads, especially in the context of a 1-rep max deadlift. Now, as far as that deadlift goes, mammoth bar wagon wheel deadlift is kind of an irregular one. I've actually never seen that before, but if we think about it, it's a lot like a Hummer tire deadlift because there's going to be a ton of flex and you're pulling from an elevated position. So I think pause deadlifts are going to be really valuable here. Reverse bands are probably going to be the most mechanically similar to the deadlift he's doing, and block pulls. These are all going to help show up and mimic that deadlift's unique pull. Accessories, pretty standard operation here. We're thinking lots of supplemental back work, RDLs, back extensions, good mornings, things of that ilk, triceps, and general shoulder stability. Nico is incredibly explosive and athletic, and we don't want to lose that by going straight into a heavy, long-term block progression for his deadlift and Viking press, when instead what we can do is just develop those attributes kind of beneath the surface while retaining his athleticism. And then as we move towards the peak, bring all that to the surface and then put the athleticism and the explosiveness more on the boilerplate and the backside of things. Because really the show itself to me is relatively static. I mean, yes, the truck pull, obviously, it's a moving event, but it's less, it's one of those ones where there's a really high force output and lower velocity observationally. And again, all this, we're going to play with it. Single leg work is going to show up. This just kind of gives you a very brief and broad pie in the sky look at how we might go about setting up some long-term training progressions and using waves to build off of one another. Anyways, folks, hope you found something useful in this one. Feel free to comment down below if you've got any questions. Love to clarify them. Best questions are ones I will turn into videos down the road. As always, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's something I'd probably love to do with you. If you're interested, leave me a comment and I'll be in touch. And I will catch you folks in the next video. Have a good one.